My son sneaks in the fridge and will eat entire bars of butter, and I'm always like, oh my
because
goodness.
their brain, they need that raw fat.
They
The raw
need it.
fat
They
drives
absolutely
the
need it.
minerals into the bones. Their bones are still developing tremendously when they're young. And you want to build dense bones, and even adults need it. I mean, you know, we have bones too, and we don't want to get osteoporosis. But also the fat, over 50% of breast milk is raw fat, and that's for the brain. The brain needs that fat.
The brain
So they're
is
craving
made out
it.
of fat. Brain is made out of fat. So the dry weight of the brain is largely fat. And what people don't understand, that 12% of the dry weight of the brain is arachidonic acid. It is a particular fatty acid. And arachidonic acid comes from butter, from egg yolks, and from animal fat. Children who are toxic, and not only autistic children, but schizophrenics and obsessive compulsive disorder adults and depressive adults and lots of other people with psychological and psychiatric conditions, they lose arachidonic acid in droves because the toxicity and the inflammation in the body leaches it out of the cell membranes. It leaches it out of the brain. Literally, when we do MRI scans of the brain of severely depressed and schizophrenic patients, we see shrinkage of the brain matter. We see shrinkage of the brain because they're losing the very substance that the brain cells are made of, the arachidonic acid. So they need tons and tons of it. So the child must eat all the fats which contain arachidonic acid, which is skin on the poultry, crackling on the pork, fat on the lamb, on the beef, the butter, the cheese, all this, and the egg yolks are very important for them to have lots and lots
But
of.
getting back to why digestion is so important, you can say your child needs fat, your child needs protein, your child needs minerals, but you've got to have the gut flora there. You've got to have the digestive tract working properly, or you can't digest the
Otherwise, it
fats.
won't digest it properly, and it will not absorb properly. Because the gut lining gets blunted, it gets damaged, it's unable to handle foods, and it's unable to absorb them properly. In my book, I've got a picture of enterocytes, which are the little cells which line our gut lining, which are the most important cells, which carry the enzymes. There they are, little guys. So on the right, there is a healthy enterocytes. The hair on its head are called microvilli. It's a brush border. And they produce the digestive enzymes called brush border enzymes. These are the enzymes which complete the digestive process, and then the enterocytes absorb it. In autistic children, they look like that, like the little guy on the left. Their hair is all broken off. They haven't got the enzymes. They're unable to digest and absorb foods. So these children malabsorb and maldigest, so they're malnourished. And at the same time, their gut, instead of being a source of nourishment, becomes the major source of toxicity in these children. It just poisons them, it doesn't feed them, unfortunately. So we do have to heal the gut, and for that the diet is absolutely paramount, very, very important. The basis of the diet should remove foods which feed pathogens and which challenge the enterocytes. And these are processed carbohydrates and sugars. The only sugars which are allowed in the diet are monosugars, which come from ripe fruit, from non-starch vegetables. Honey is allowed, and dried fruit is allowed on the diet. All the rest of it, which means all the grains, starchy vegetables like potatoes, sweet potato, yams, Jerusalem artichokes, and parsnips have to be out as well. Beans and pulses are very hard to digest, so they're also out in the initial stages of the diet. Later on, as the gut heals and becomes more robust and more able to handle foods, certain beans and pulses can be introduced gradually.
And the way food is prepared is so critical too. For example, we also on our Bedrock program, you know, you can't take all the sugars away from children, and they've got to have something to eat. So we say, okay, have some of the more sour fruits because they have less sugar in them. Lemons, limes, cranberries, blueberries, strawberries, pineapple, they're more sour. And then if our children are also eating cultured veggies and drinking the young coconut kefir drink, and so we know that the microflora are in there actually eating up the sugars in the food. But when we, I am a big believer in grains. I know that 8 out of 10 of the autistic children are blood type A, but the grains that we have on the body ecology diet are quinoa and millet, amaranth and buckwheat, and they are really not true grains. They're really seeds that are grain-like. They're very high in protein, and how we prepare them is critical. I encourage people to wash them and soak them for at least 24 hours. And we actually put something in the water that's fermented to break down the proteins and the phytic acid. So by the time you drain those grains and cook them, they're so digestible, and that makes all the difference in the world. As humans, we have the ability to look at something and say, well, this could be a good food, but it isn't digestible. So what can we do to make it more digestible? So fermenting, whenever you use fermented food, whenever you ferment something, you increase its nutrients hundreds of times, and you make it more digestible as well. So this is why that's really the finest way to, the finest foods that you can put in the body are the foods that are fermented. And they have these unseen beings in those foods. We have no idea that they're there since we can't see them, which is a good thing. You know, who would want to see little bugs crawling around on your food? But they're there and they're good. And when we eat the foods, they make it through the stomach acid, they make it down into the intestines, and they just do wonderful things. They, you know, one of the things we know too, serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's manufactured in the gut and transported up into the brain. There's the entire health of the body is really determined by what's happening in the gut. We believe that the gut flora are actually very much aware at all times of what's going on throughout the whole body. We have two brains in our body. We have one in our intestines that we call the enteric nervous system, and then we have another brain in our head called the brain and the central nervous system. But the two brains are actually connected by the vagus nerve, and they really function as one. If the microflora are in there communicating to the gut wall, and there is research showing that the microflora actually can communicate to the gut wall, and they can even tell the gut wall to grow more blood vessels so that it absorbs more nutrients. But it communicates to the gut wall what's going on. It's very, very possible, and this is where I'd love to see a lot more research on this information being picked up, moved up into the brain and the head, sent out into the body, and by the same token, information that's in the body is relayed back down into the gut where the microflora are existing, and they are very much aware that the body needs calcium or the body needs more proteins at this moment. And I've noticed myself, because I've been eating fermented foods for years, my intuition has really become outstanding. And I think that if I need something, I know exactly what my body needs. I think that the fermented foods have helped purify my body, and that's what we see with everybody that's eating the fermented foods. Their bodies become cleaner because the microflora are actually keeping the intestines cleaner. Therefore, the lymph system's cleaner, the liver's cleaner, the blood's cleaner, the cells are cleaner. And as the body becomes cleaner and more well-nourished, and when you have these microflora living inside of you, you just know what to feed yourself. And you also just have a sense of, even when people come to my house, I just know what it is their body needs. And I think we all have that intuition, but we're so gunked up with chemicals and toxins in our body that we don't even have access to our intuition anymore, but it's a normal part of a healthy body.
The good news is that the parents generally are advised to follow the strict diet for about a couple of years. That's how long it takes. Obviously, every child is individual. In some children, this process is shorter and quicker. Some children take longer. That's how long it takes for the gut to heal and to reestablish normal gut flora. And at that stage, the parents find that on an occasional basis, the child can eat anything. They can go to a birthday party and have all the horrible things children eat there, and they're fine and they don't react to it anymore because their gut lining has healed. It doesn't absorb a lot of these things. It doesn't let the toxins through. And even if some toxic substances like colorants and flavorings and preservatives and other horrible things from the cakes and lollies and sugars came in, their detoxification system is clean enough and capable enough of handling those. Just like our detox systems are handling that. We have a sweet or we have a something like that and we don't turn autistic, do we? We don't react, healthy people. So that's what happens to an autistic child. Once their gut lining is healed and clean and the gut flora is reestablished, they can handle a normal pasta or a normal piece of bread or a normal cake or a normal ice cream. And they're okay. As long as they don't revert to the typical children's diet nowadays of eating these things day in and day out, of course, because it isn't healthy for anybody.